Hey, so this week we're starting a 3-week sermon series on Hebrews. We're doing Hebrews chapter 11 through 12. It's 2 short chapters, but they really preach. We read a section of chapter 11, the first section, and I'll share a little bit more about that with you in a moment. But I want you to understand Hebrews is an epistle. It's a letter written to a church. We don't know much about it. We don't know where exactly the church was. We don't know who wrote it. We know more about who didn't write it than we do about who wrote it. We don't know when it was written, but we kind of have a time frame of 60 to 100 AD because it was actually quoted by a theologian in the late first century, like 90 to 100 AD. So it had to have existed before if it was quoted that way. We assume that it was written to a group of Hebrews. Hebrews are Jewish people who converted to Christianity, and they were facing some challenges in the church, as we know with most of the letters in the New Testament. There's like these challenges or these theological discussions that happen, and you know, do we have to do works or is it faith, or all this stuff goes on. So the epistles are written to help correct the church and give the people of the church ways to live their lives in healthy ways. So what happened in Hebrews is the church was declining, and the people were getting discouraged, and they were working so hard and not seeing any fruit from their labor, so they were getting tired. And this letter was written to encourage them. It's like a long sermon. You know, I could just read it to you, and you would find a huge blessing from it. If I could read well, I don't read well. If I could preach it, you'd find a huge blessing from it. You can read it on your own at home. I want to encourage you to do that, but at least read chapter 11 and 12 over the next few weeks. The opening line is quoted all over the place. It's the best definition I can think of for for faith. Now, faith is confidence in what we hope for and assurance about what we do not see. When we're in a church environment, it becomes a churchy word, right? How are you saved? By faith. What does that mean? When we talk outside of the church, it becomes a little bit more concrete, right? So when you got up this morning, maybe you use an alarm clock. You had faith that the alarm clock would go off at the time that you set it at the night before so that you would be woken and get to church on time. You had faith that when you got in your car and you turned the key, that the car would start and it would be reliable enough to get you to church so that you could be here. When it's funny, you know, God is funny. When I came in this morning, I had faith that all of our technology would work right. What do you have faith in? I want to kind of take you on a couple of little exercises and then call it a morning with you. The exercises are designed to help you understand where your line is. Here's what I mean. I had a great conversation with Pat earlier this week, and I want to share parts of that with you. I'm not going to throw you under the bus or anything, but we had a good conversation about lines in the sand. Because in church, we talk about sacrificial love. And Jesus is our example. He sacrificed everything for us. It gives us warm, fuzzy feelings inside. It creates an environment where we can actually somehow, mystically, miraculously, because of his sacrifice, he bore our sins so that we can be in a relationship with God like never before and throughout all eternity. It's powerful, it's incredible, and it was provided to us through his sacrifice. But when we talk about the command he left for us, love as you've been loved. And he's talking about how he loved us, right? how do you love the people around you? And where are the lines you draw? It gets tricky. Because we all want to sacrifice everything because Christ sacrificed everything for us. That's our call. That's what we're moving to as we move through this life spiritually. We're trying to grow in that attitude and that persistence about sacrificial love. But we all have our lines in the sand. We all draw these lines as we grow in our faith. We move from line to line to line to line. What do I mean by that? When I was in seminary, we learned about sacrificial love, and I happened to live in a town where on Friday and Saturday nights there were a lot of homeless people on the streets, and they were out panhandling. And I was a college student and didn't have much money at the time, and I was kind of offended because I was a New York City person. I'm a New Jersey person, but we would go into New York City. And when there's homeless people who are panhandling, they usually just have a bucket or something out and a sign, and they don't bother you. But when I went to LA for seminary, I found out that the people in the town that were panhandling where I was living would actually follow you and have conversation with you about why they needed you to give them money until you got so obnoxious about it they'd stop. It was very uncomfortable. It was almost like you'd pay them to just leave you alone. In those situations, how much would you give? And what are the excuses that you would make in your head for not giving someone money that they're telling you they need? Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying go out and give everything to a homeless person. Because there's a whole slew of rationale in our minds that God designed us with our minds to run through, a whole checklist of things like what our responsibilities are and how much you have and what your bills are and what you need and what they're going to do with the money and how safe it is, and there's a whole slew of things that we need to go through. But there are also checklists that we have with our loved ones. How much will you sacrifice of what you want for your spouse or your child? And I've noticed, especially as my children have grown up, that the sacrifice that I was willing to offer for them when they were little, it has gotten way different as they've gotten older. Because there's expectations and responsibilities that tie into it and all that. But where are the lines you draw?